This is the clever technology behind the scenes to get Facebook working live and all this sort of thing. So we needed to have a little bit of silence at the start of the call. So I've said it already. I'll say it again because I like saying it. Good morning, Redbourn. My name's Simon Vegro, and I welcome everybody listening to another Active in Redbourn weekly call. I do want to start and not go on with some of my long-winded introductions I've had before. I think the regular listeners have heard enough of me, and it's not me dialing to listen to anyway. But I do want to thank everybody that's donated to keep these calls free. It's really, really lovely and generous of you, and it's most welcome. And those people include Jan Brown, Adam and Lulu Shapton, Sally Bartlett, Doris Cheetham, Rachel Mackey, and Brian Gunson, who's actually a guest on the call today. And to our lovely parish council for giving us a grant from September onwards. It is our intention to keep this call going till the end of the year, whatever happens with lockdown, and then we'll sort of take a view sort of December time. As I just intimated, the call is now available live on the Redbourners Facebook page through some very clever technology and very clever people. And afterwards, apparently, it can be found as a recording there and on our website. I don't know how they do that, but they're brilliant. As in previous weeks, everybody bar today's speakers is on mute, so you can make as much noise as you like, boil the kettle, anything you want to do. Let the dog bark, it doesn't matter because we can't hear you, so don't worry about that. But obviously, the speakers are not on mute. We've had a whole load of fantastic guests on these calls for the last couple of months, and today we've got, I think we're excelling ourselves really with some very interesting guests for you. Brian Gunson, who wears so many hats, it's quite extraordinary, but we had to choose one. So today we'll be focusing on his involvement with Redbourn Tennis Club and what we can learn from the wonderful things they've been doing. Carla Ryan Griffiths works for Herts County Council. And as we'll see, she has one sort of formal hat, but actually wears hundreds, and it's a really fascinating story. And as always, we've had Will Gibbs, our vicar, with us.
Good morning, Simon, and hope the listeners out there haven't missed too much about Wimbledon. Mind you, I must admit I've had my surfeit of strawberries and cream. I hope everybody else has.
Not yet, actually, but I'm looking forward to having some later. Well, we do need to cover Wimbledon, but before we cover Wimbledon, can I just ask you some sort of more mundane questions?
Of course,
if you don't mind. So, as I just said, you wear several very interesting hats, and it was quite difficult to sort of pick the right one. But we thought but we thought we'd talk about cricket. Sorry, cricket. I just had a flash up on the screen. We thought we'd talk about tennis, not to get confused.
Yeah, okay.
So I've opted for your involvement in the Redbourn Tennis Club. Now, I gather you're the new chair. Can you just tell us, before we get going, what that involves, and I suppose neatly segueing into how that role's been working during lockdown?
Yeah, of course. Well, Redbourn Tennis Club has got 4 beautiful courts up at Greyhound Meadow. I don't know whether anybody knows where Greyhound Meadow is. It's up on it's at East Common, and by where the allotments are and the Scout Hut, and it's run by volunteers. It currently has nearly over 200 members, so and that's expanded in the last few weeks, and we'll come on to that perhaps later in some of the questions. And it's a friendly club. It appeals to people of all standards. We obviously haven't been playing matches at the moment, but and we're just getting the coaching going again. So it's and we have a great social time as well. And I think the spring back party or the spring party, we had to defer, and I think we're having to defer the spring back party. We had attracted people from all over the village. So it's not just about the tennis, it's also about creating a social life as well in Redbourn. So it's a great club, and the land is provided by the parish council, so we're really indebted to them. So that's it, Si. Great club.
Okay, lovely. So how about, tell us about the club and lockdown then, right? How that's all been, obviously a huge topic, but how's it been coping? What's it been doing that's different to what it did before, and how's it all been working for the club?
Yeah, well, it's a non-contact sport. You'd think it'd be relatively easy to maintain social distancing in a safe environment, and one of the reasons I've now become chairman is because the whole COVID-19 stuff has really created an issue about making sure we can have safe play. And if you remember, there was a certain Boris back in May, not Boris Becker, but Boris Johnson, who opened the doors to golf and tennis. And we opened play 10 days later. But we had to do a lot of things to make that safe and all the rest. And although it's a naturally distant sport, it's obvious that sometimes when you've got that one shot that, you'd be proud if Roger Federer had actually shot it. Actually, it's a usual fluke in my case. Which we high five and all the rest of it. And we're also very polite when we go on court and shake hands and all the rest of it. And and also, we play with tennis balls, and tennis balls can obviously transmit. So we've done a number of things there. The first thing we had to do was a really serious risk assessment, and in fact our risk assessment's become a blueprint for other clubs across Hertfordshire. So that was the first thing we did, and that took that few days from when Boris said, yeah, you can play, and we said, no, you can't, not yet anyway. And we had to implement, we haven't got a booking system, so we had to implement a booking system so that we could track who's played and when. So if we did have an incident of somebody going down with the virus, we could actually know who was playing where and ask them all to self-isolate. So that's a really socially responsible action that we took towards getting play. It also made us restrict our play. We've got those wonderful azure blue and green courts, and if you ever get an aerial shot of Redbourn, it looks like 4 swimming pools in the middle of Redbourn. And so we've had, and there's 2 sets of adjacent courts divided by a fence. So we've actually said, well, 4 people can play on the top at any one time and 4 on the bottom, and that means either is as doubles or 2 groups of single players, i.e. 4 single players playing. We may expand that to 6 because we're now allowed groups of 6, so you may have a doubles and a singles or coaching going on. You have to play with our own balls, which means when you serve, you make sure you serve with your own balls. And the good thing for that, Simon, our ball sales have gone up, so that's a bit of revenue coming from that.
Very
we
good.
also asked that if players were playing, that they sign an agreement. This means it's like a sort of an accord. It sort of sets out the things that they are responsible for as well, which includes things like disinfecting the lock and the handles. So we're back to playing, and as a socially distanced sport, you think, that was easy, but it wasn't. But we had to do a lot of things to get back to that state.
Yeah, it sounds like you did an awful lot of good work there. You just touched on the fact that other clubs have followed your blueprint. Do you know who they are and how they found out about what Redbourn Tennis Club have done?
Well, clubs like Rothamsted and Salisbury and Hartland obviously is a very big club, and it's a managed club. It's not run by volunteers, so that's a different kettle of fish altogether. Yeah, we've either found it out by stealth, or we've actually had direct calls from people saying, well, we hear you've done one. And I think that's a testament, really, to the work that the club did and the committee members did to get that in place. So we're setting the pace again, aren't we, Simon, in Redbourn?
Absolutely, as Redbourn always does.
Absolutely.
Which is. So, is there anything that you're doing now in the lockdown period, or processes that you've started to do that you'll keep doing if and when this lockdown ever ends?
That's a really, really interesting question. We sort of prided ourselves as a club where you could go up and play. I mean, there's a number of things we aren't doing at the moment, and we'd like to do eventually. I mean, there's no what we call mix-ins, when anybody can turn up and play on various days of the week. There's no club tournaments. There's no matches with other clubs. We're just about starting one-to-one individual coaching. And as I say, the good thing is there's a lot of families that are playing. So I think, and we've implemented the booking system. So we may keep the booking system going. It might be a good thing to do. It at least guarantees court play time. We would love to do more with the families because, we've got over 30 families who are now members, bringing our membership, as I said earlier, to over 200. So, yeah, we'll do more with that. And also, we've had people join of all different abilities. So I think it's not just about playing matches and being absolutely competitive. It's getting out into the open air, Simon, and actually getting people of all abilities to get up there and play with mixed ability. So it's a really, truly open club, and is open for players of all types. So,
and that's great. And I suppose it is great. Sorry, go on, Brian.
No, you go.
I was just going to say it's great that it's something that everybody can do right now, isn't it? Whatever, there are some sports obviously people can't play.
Not today.
Not today, maybe. But soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do say if people are really interested or know of family that are interested, and some of our listeners may not be back to playing tennis, but sure they have families that either live in Redbourn and all the rest of it, then go to our website and just type in Redbourn Tennis Club and contact us. We can then update on what we are doing, what the activities are, and we're also looking for volunteers to help us with events, whether it's on our committee. And our committee, interesting, ranges from the age of 17 to 70. So it's a quite inclusive committee in terms of the members of it. And we're also looking for a welfare officer to focus on such things as safeguarding. So if any of your listeners out there have got experience and would like to help us out, it'd be great to hear from you.
Well, and how will they find you again, Brian? Do they just Google Redbourn Tennis Club?
Yeah, it's the best one. Rather than remember the website now, just type in Redbourn Tennis Club and it'll come straight up. And you can go in there and it's got all the latest stuff on there, including the newsletter.
Great. Well, it's lovely that Redbourn Tennis Club is doing so well, that you've done such a great job and that you're doing all these wonderful things to get the sport going again. I'd just like to expand a little bit now and talk about something we were talking about just before the course started, which is a minor tournament called Wimbledon, which obviously sadly isn't happening this year. I just wanted to, because we can't have a conversation about tennis without talking about Wimbledon, I don't think. Tell us something about how you're missing it. Where do we start?
Well, I don't think you have to play or even love tennis to watch Wimbledon. I think Wimbledon is one of those events that surpasses everything. A lot of people will watch Wimbledon and never watch another tennis match in the year. I think I watched those fantastic finals that have happened over the years with such characters, and in later years, Djokovic and Federer. I mean, 9.6 million people watched that final last year. That's amazing, absolutely amazing. And it's not just UK; it's across the world. It's one of the Grand Slam tournaments. So, and I miss the strawberries and cream. It's a good excuse, isn't it?
And do you miss the pins?
The what? Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I probably miss the pins more than the strawberries and cream, actually.
Yeah, I prefer the ones with gin and a cucumber in. Yeah, they're great.
Yeah. Now, just finally, Brian, am I right in thinking that Wimbledon's completely cancelled this year? It's not postponed, is it, like the US Open was and the French?
No,
they're going ahead, aren't they? Is Wimbledon just gone?
It's gone. I mean, it's fascinating to see on BBC Two some of the old matches, between people like Borg and McEnroe, and you look back, that's 40 years ago, and I'm sure we all remember Borg and McEnroe, and even some of and more recently people like Tim Henman. Well, Tim Henman was quite a while ago now, and Andy, of course, the Murray. So it's a great event, isn't it? And I think a lot of people would say, yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people are missing it. I'm missing it desperately.
Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? But it'll be back. It'll be back.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be back with a vengeance next year. And of course we still have some good tennis to look forward to later in the year, albeit not in this country.
Yeah,
Brian, thanks ever so much for that. Thanks. Final thing before we do you have any sort of last minute message of any kind with any of your wonderful hats that you wear for the villagers of Redbourn?
No, I don't think that would take another 25 minutes, I think. Sorry, Simon. But no, I was going to say about tennis. It's a great way to get into the open air and watch the red kite, because they seem to like flying over the tennis court, and that totally distracts the game. Well, at least that's my excuse. And it's the only racket game in our town, or should I say our village, at the moment. So give it a go. We'd love to see players. New members.
Oh, lovely. Brian, thank you so much for that. I'm sure everyone found that very interesting, and I hope they will get involved, and it's a good call out for the volunteers that you need.
Yeah.
So I'm now going to move on to Will. Will, have you made the call today?
Hello, Simon. Good morning. Yeah.
Good morning. Was it your dog by any chance we heard barking?
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah.
Oh,
I can usually guarantee that a postal delivery will coincide with the call in, and then he's just telling me because. We have got a doorbell, but the dog likes just to make doubly sure that I am aware that we've got a parcel on the doorstep now.
Oh, well, I wasn't complaining. It's actually rather nice to know that the dog's happy and safe and doing the role of alerting, I suppose, that the postman might be there.
Well, Simon, he's now unhappy and safe in the utility room, so...
Oh, I feel quite guilty now. Okay,
I've banished him.
Okay, well, as always, thank you for dialing in, and it's your slot for a thought for the week, so I won't preamble anymore, and I'll just hand over to you, and we're all looking forward to hearing what you've got to say today.
Thank you very much. I want to talk about a TV program that was on recently. In doing so, I know I'm in danger of giving the impression that all I do is sit around watching television at the time, all the time, because I spoke about another program only a fortnight ago. Well, the truth of the matter is that during lockdown, I haven't had as many evening meetings, and I can't say I miss them. My workload has changed. The days are long, and I can't take Friday as a day off very easily anymore. But when I have finished for the day, it's been lovely to enjoy an evening meal and then a bit of telly. I still don't watch very much. I really enjoyed the Land of the Midnight Sun with Alexander Armstrong, a rather more genial and boyish version of Louis Theroux, travelling halfway around the Arctic Circle. He must have been very enthusiastic, and it must have been very beautifully filmed, because despite wind chill temperatures of -20 or -30, I still really fancied visiting some of those remote places and going to those fascinating communities and experiencing their cultures. And that leads me on to what I want to say this morning, because when we visit or embrace the things that are different, not only do we understand them better, but we might find in them things that inspire us or change us for the better. The natural human tendency is to be attracted to people who are like us. It is well documented that most of our friends will come from similar backgrounds and cultures.
To mute your line.
They will be of the same race and similar age, and will have the same educational history, political views, and employment prospects. But do we really want to live in a society where we gravitate towards the similar and polarized communities, even if this is all happening at a subconscious level? We must confront and examine what is known as our unconscious bias. By definition, it is those things that we don't know we have, that prejudice or bias, but are born out of unintended attitudes or stereotypes. This was explored in the recent Channel 4 documentary entitled The School That Tried to End Racism. It was powerful and topical, and the children that featured were impressively honest, open, and eloquent. As calls for racial justice continue with Black Lives Matter protests, it is increasingly recognized that racism is a systemic issue and that racial bias forms from a very young age. So how can schools help to mitigate or even end racism? Well, we followed in this program a class of 11 and 12-year-olds in a Sutton Comprehensive on a 3-week experiment led by university psychologists and behavioral scientists. The experiment started with the students taking a bespoke version of the Harvard Implicit Association Test, which is the benchmark test for unconscious racial bias. Tests have revealed that children as young as 6 are actually aware of racial differences, but as a society we do not talk about them and often take the colourblind approach to race. Indeed, most of the students in the program show racial bias, with most perceiving white people as more favourable than non-whites. In the 2 one-hour episodes, we witnessed the journey of students in reversing their racial bias. It is based on the idea of segregation experiment, where students identified as white and non-white are separated into 2 affinity groups to discuss issues around race. It made them quite uncomfortable initially, with some from mixed race backgrounds not really knowing which group to be in, and 2 friends, one black boy and one white boy, clearly very uncomfortable about being separated from each other. For the white children in particular, it was painful to watch them try and talk about issues of race for fear of saying the wrong thing. But it was good to see the black and minority ethnic children getting this fantastic opportunity to own their identity, to talk about it, and the things they've experienced. Tragically for one of the 11-year-old boys who was black, he told of several occasions when he'd experienced shocking racism in his young life already. When he tells his mum, she downplays it. It was almost as if she'd been beaten down into just accepting that it was part and parcel of life. Well, they're tested again at the end of this 3 weeks, and it was shown that through confronting the issue, And speaking about race and privilege, it can confront those attitudes that might otherwise unintentionally prevail. The result, wonderfully but surprisingly, after only such a short time, showed that most now had little or no unconscious bias. While schools may not end racism, the programme demonstrated that they have an extremely important part to play in wider efforts towards racial equality. But what this programme also taught me once again is that we need to move towards difference and not away from it. That honest and open conversation about race is really important at whatever age we are, and it's never too late for us to challenge our assumptions and respectfully ask questions to further our understanding. Only then can we truly start to become a single, open and just society.
Thank you, Will. Well, as always, when you do your thoughts for the week, I'm quite moved and fascinated by the things you said. I didn't realise that racial bias, by the way, and I know I'm taking just one extract from a lot of things you said there, starts at such an early age.
It's incredible. Yes, 6- and 7-year-olds can be aware of racial difference, and with it, if we're not careful, start to form sort of preconceived ideas or run with stereotypes. So I think it's something that we as individuals, but as society, will need to work quite hard at. And it's that unconscious bias. Most people you talk to would say, "Oh, well, I'm not racist," but actually, it's sometimes those things that we haven't really explored in ourselves. We might already have some preconceived ideas about how someone's going to be or how they're going to behave, and that all needs unpicking and challenging, I think.
Yes, absolutely, and I suppose I hope that right now, given recent events and obviously many of them absolutely tragic, that a change is going to come. There's a song about that, isn't there? Wouldn't it be wonderful to think that we can make some real progress here?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there are easy answers and quick fixes. No. I think the protests have been important and powerful in this country, as they have been across the Atlantic. But actually, to protest is not enough. What needs to start to happen is action and dialogue and learning. And we need to explore ways to challenge this in ourselves and of each other.
Absolutely. Well, Will, thank you as always. A really interesting speech, and thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Carla, thank you for your patience. I think you've been sitting out there quietly listening for the last 20 minutes or so. Thank you very much for your patience.
No problem.
Good morning to you too. A bit belated. Good morning. Thank you for dialing in. Now, as I intimated at the start in my brief introduction, Brian has a number of hats. You also have, I think, one hat, but it turned out to be that wearing multiple hats, which we'll come to in a moment. But can I just start by asking you what your formal job title is at Herts County Council?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to talk. I feel like I've got a bit of imposter syndrome here, just talking about my job, especially after Will's very moving statement. I work at Hertfordshire County Council as the media manager within corporate communications.
Okay, and what would that ordinarily involve, Carla?
So it's managing the sort of news for the council, so running the press office, running the social media, and sort of managing the reputation, so talking to a lot of journalists and trying to make sure that Hertfordshire County Council's good name is represented proactively and sort of defended reactively.
Okay, I bet talking to journalists is fun. I won't ask you to comment on that. Okay, so I guess given the recent events of obviously around the virus, things have taken a slightly different turn. So would you like to tell us how the job's evolved and all the sort of different things you're doing now than what you thought you might be doing?
Yeah, so I began this job full-time last September. So a lot of what we were talking about was standard council information, budget consultations, looking at all the different directorates for adult social care, children's social care, managing fire service, you know, fairly standard things. And then in February, we started to get a number of calls mostly from schools, because we do all of the schools crisis communications, saying, oh, we've got a case in our school and we don't know what to do and we don't know how to tell people. And it just kind of escalated out of all proportions for a couple of weeks. Suddenly we became an emergency comms office for all of the public health in Hertfordshire, as well as the 500 schools and the fire services, and then looking across, there's 8,000 staff that cover all the different services from libraries through to social workers, and they were all starting to feel that it was almost impossible for them to do their jobs safely. And then we had lockdown, so suddenly 8,000 staff were working from their kitchens, mostly with their children
Yeah.
as well. So it's been a real change of pace. So we've had to work very differently and figure out the best way we can continue doing what we were doing before. But on top of that is a whole new layer of tasks that have come down to local government to be responsible for that previously we weren't.
And can you give us some examples of what they were or what they are?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, we had to look at volunteers. I think over 10,000 volunteers were registered in Hertfordshire through a partnership of Hearts Help. And I know in Redbourn we had a similar a Redbourn volunteers group that Celine set up. And it was very similar to that, but done on a Hertfordshire basis. And we had to suddenly also start delivering food and medicine packages. Those are the sort of the bespoke ones. So alongside what went out nationally, for people who have very bespoke diets or very specific needs. I think there's over 100,000 in Hertfordshire who needed packages delivered and medicines delivered. And we opened 2 care homes that had been closed to use them as almost like a halfway house. So for COVID-19 patients who were in recovery but not well enough to return either to their own homes or to go into a care home. And we've just had the most, we've had to shut down loads of services, all of our libraries have had to shut, but as a consequence of that, we've had like a 300% increase of people using the online library services. And obviously we've managed 500 odd schools needing to shut and have distance learning, but then still remain open for key workers and vulnerable children. Well, it's been quite some journey. As well, on top of that, we've been running public campaigns about hand washing and social distancing and shutting down highways and high streets to allow people to walk past each other safely. So it's been a really multifaceted response.
That sounds extraordinary. I mean, would it be fair to say that you've not been bored?
Even trying to breathe in and out, let alone get bored.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it just sounds extraordinary. All the different I hadn't really thought about all the different things the council does, but when you point it out like that, it is an extraordinary amount of work you're doing. And I guess leads on to the next question, which is how successful. I mean, have you got sort of success criteria for it, or how can you judge how successful your work's been, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing for many of the services that have been delivered, like food and medicine packages, is are we reaching everybody?
Yeah.
And then there's the sort of public safety element for opening these 2 previously shut down care homes and making sure all of our care homes in the county are run by private providers that we commission. So we had to set up a communications hub for all of our care providers because there's over 60 of them and they're run as private businesses. So we created a suite of toolkit materials of how they could communicate, and that just turned into a real sort of engine room for providing advice and safety advice. We had to set up just for the care homes, but actually for all of our services. We've developed these sort of cells. It's quite military of how we work things, but one cell that I can give you an example of was for PPE. So previously we would use PPE for home carers to make sure we are being safe and not passing germs between people. Yep. And certainly in schools occasionally, or district nurses might use it. Suddenly everybody needed PPE, and we didn't want to have 800 or 900 people all bidding for PPE against each other because you'd make a massive price spike. So we ended up creating a cell. So PPE has been completely controlled by the council in a way that it never used to be. So it's been bought in and then distributed, made sure that there's no competition between the council services and the NHS services. And all of the cost for all of those home care providers has been completely underwritten, at least till the end of September by the council. We lobbied government for funding and got funding for it. And somehow communications just gets dragged into all of these different functions.
I bet, yeah.
We need to support in so many different ways, and the public affairs element of allowing senior managers access and getting the politicians involved in what we need them to do. So it's been a lot of new work. But in terms of measuring it, I think basically for things like town centres, if we shut them down and we can allow people to social distance, the public are very good at giving feedback to the council. If we get it wrong, we tend to know pretty fast.
Right.
We of our contact centre take something like 45,000 calls in a week, so
Really?
we do know very quickly if things are going well or not. So yeah.
Wow.
An interesting one.
An interesting one. So you touched a little bit earlier on about the changing working practice, for example, people working from home and so on. Is there anything, do you think, that you're, a bit like the question I asked for Brian, that you might continue to do once the lockdown is finally over? Are you sort of learning lessons about how the way the council operates might be permanent features sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's two strands. One is about the people. So part of Hertfordshire County Council's big transformation strategy for the next 10 years was trying to encourage people to work from home once a fortnight.
Right.
And now, sort of out of the 8,000 staff, probably at least 6,000 remain working remotely all the time at the moment. Because they can. So there was a massive job for IT when we first went into lockdown to roll out MS Teams to everybody to allow the right amount of bandwidth so that everybody who needed to be online could be online and get access to things quickly. So that's one thing that's worked really well, and I think it's allowed all the different levels of management to see that you can be, if not more effective, working remotely when you haven't got to spend time and money commuting. The downside of that is that we all miss each other's company, especially in communications. We're a social bunch. So I think we have little meetings, like we have a Wellbeing Wednesday that was on earlier this morning, so we just have half an hour as a whole wider comm team. There's about 20 of us, and we just, we play a quiz, or someone does a cooking demonstration, just something not work related just for half an hour. And that would have been the time that we were making cups of tea next to each other, or just passing in the corridor and having that conversation that makes it a bit more, I don't know, interesting, not just constantly working. But the other stream that's definitely going to come through this is that there's two tiers of local government. So there's the county council as the tier 1, and tier 2 there are 10 district councils across the whole of Hertfordshire, and we've had to just work as one unit. Alongside with the police, alongside with the NHS. And the NHS is obviously split up differently into CCGs and different districts, east and west, north and south. So we've had to really work together, and there's been a lot of talk about devolution of powers. There are a lot of things that all of us are doing locally that we didn't have responsibility for in January. But collectively, and I think the way that we've worked together has been amazing.
So hopefully that will continue.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Okay, well, in all these different things you've been doing for the last few months, have there been any sort of memorable moments or exciting ones or noteworthy things that have happened that you can share with the public?
Oh, yeah, that's it. Can you share? I was very delighted to get a phone call from the New York Times when we first started to go into lockdown. I genuinely thought when I joined this, Hertfordshire County Council in September, having had some sort of high-profile roles previously, that I would rather be keeping my head down. This will be a nice, safe job. I understand the parameters of it, and I can just operate comfortably. I didn't ever anticipate that New York Times would be really, really interested about a school in Hertfordshire. So that was like a nice start to it. But in that first 24 hours, we created a public safety campaign about hand washing. And I have never taken so much video footage of people singing Happy Birthday twice through. On all different days, from the Director of Public Health to nurses in schools. But that was, again, that was a lovely moment because it ended up being a blueprint, and our communications was recognised nationally and rolled out and demonstrated to lots of other councils. So that was a good moment right at the start. And recently we provide the sort of 24/7 comms response within my team for the fire service. So on top of all of this happening, of course, there are still fires all the time. And so I did have an amusing call with one of my colleagues who was on call and called me and said, I've got to go to this fire and I've got this really important question. I was like, oh gosh, what is it? Is it a really complicated one? Is there lots of people? What's happening? She's like, I don't know what to wear. What? Yeah. Like, can I go in my hoodie? Do I need to put my suit on? Do I need to wear a mask? So it's just all these different things that suddenly something that would be so easy for us to just rush out of the house and deal with something. Suddenly there's this extra layer of complexity of this new way that we exist and how we have to suddenly be or look or behave differently to how we did before.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I've got to ask you, by the way, about the New York Times, if I may. Why did they, what was that, can you tell